Immigration can take many forms. Lena Himmel was a 16-year-old orphan who was legally brought from Lithuania to New York just before the turn of the 20th century by some relatives who wanted her to marry their son. The marriage never materialized. Instead, she became a seamstress and married David Bryant, a Brooklyn jeweler who died 2 years later. Lena saw an opportunity. She pawned a pair of diamond earrings that her husband had left her and bought a sewing machine. By 1904, she had done well enough to open a store on Fifth Avenue. She attempted to make clothes for pregnant women, including a dress with an elasticized waistband. That first maternity dress was made, and Lane Bryant, the national clothing chain, was launched. Greetings, Patriots. I'm Perry Green. Welcome to God in America, where faith and freedom lead to peace and prosperity. During the American War for Independence, the King of England hired 30,000 German Hessians as mercenary soldiers to aid his redcoats. The Hessians were vicious fighters and a terror to the Americans. At the end of the conflict, about 17,000 returned to Germany. About 8,000 had died of disease or combat, and around 5,000 deserted and stayed in America because they found something preferable to waging war for money. Many of the 5,000 Hessians had been taken prisoner and forced to work on farmlands in Pennsylvania, often alongside Germans who had immigrated to America. The German POWs discovered that America wasn't the wicked place they'd been told. Instead, it was a land of peace and opportunity. So they deserted their comrades and stayed. They turned in their muskets and picked up their plows and worked among the farmers known as the Pennsylvania Dutch. The actions of the former mercenaries remind me of this passage, Isaiah 2, verses 2-4. Now it shall come to pass in the latter days that the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established on the top of the mountains and shall be exalted above the hills, and all nations shall flow to it. Many people shall come and say, Come, and let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob. He will teach us his ways, and we will walk in his paths. For out of Zion shall go forth the law and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. He shall judge between the nations and rebuke many people. They shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war any more. Satan and his henchmen want us in conflict. They're pulling the strings in America and other nations to incite Muslims to fight Jews and Christians. They're working to bring about political dominance through Marxism and despotism. At the time of this recording, New York City is already regretting the day they named a Muslim Marxist their mayor, and Virginia is reeling from its new socialist governor. Rather than go to war with others in New York City, almost 1 million New Yorkers have opted to leave the city. It has been home to their families for generations, but the threat of an Islamic Marxist robbing them through unjust taxation is too much, and they're leaving for greener pastures, but they're leaving peacefully. Ecclesiastes 3 reminds us there are times when we must go to war and fight for our families and property. The founding generation did not want war. They made numerous attempts to solve the issues with the king and parliament peacefully, but to no avail. There was no recourse. They did not pick the fight, but they would not back down. When the conflict subsided and America had been victorious at Yorktown, diplomats from both nations met in Paris in 1782 to pursue a peace treaty. The very first line of the document reads, "In the name of the most holy and undivided Trinity." That phrase alone tells us volumes about how our founders viewed the hand of God in America's independence. It wasn't a generic nod to providence. It was an explicit invocation of the Christian God. This was no accident of diplomacy. It reflected the mindset of men like John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, and John Jay, the 3 American commissioners who negotiated the treaty, all of whom believed the same divine providence that sustained them in war must now guide them in peace. Once the peace treaty had been signed, General George Washington resigned as commander-in-chief of the Continental Army and returned to Mount Vernon to re-engage in farming. Like the Hessians, Washington wanted peace and to pursue the opportunities God placed before him. His peaceful farm life didn't last long. Once we had created our Constitution, the public demanded that George Washington would be our first president. Unanimously, he carried the day. After 2 terms, he returned home to his farm until his untimely death. Compare that with the tone of most pursuits today. We've shifted from relying on providence to relying on politics and power. Peace and safety are not considered. Just look at our response to ICE and the law. Our founders understood something vital. There can be no true peace without righteousness. Isaiah 32, verse 17 reads, "The work of righteousness will be peace, and the effect of righteousness, quietness, and assurance forever." America's leaders once prayed for peace in the name of the triune God. Today we sign deals, pass laws, and wage wars without acknowledging Him at all, and we wonder why peace eludes us. If we want lasting national peace and unlimited personal opportunity, we must return to the God who is the author of peace and salvation. The Hessians came to America as mercenaries but stayed as neighbors. When God's presence invades a land, He changes enemies into allies and strangers into brothers. Patriots, if America is to remain a refuge for the weary, we must once again be a nation where peace begins with faith. Well, thanks for being with us today. Until next time, let's keep the light of God's peace across the country burning.